Hello, fam. We have a doozy of a video for you today. I still don't understand half of what this guy's problem is, but the little voices in my head tell me it's a positive message about what RPGs do, how to do them, and some nonsense about carnivals and subversive norms and window frames.
Frame shifting, Tunka, but close enough. For the next installment in the series, we are looking at Daniel McKays' The Fantasy Role-Playing Game, A New Performing Art, which is no longer quite so new. It dates to about 2001. So, to those that haven't read this book before, well, go read it. And for those who don't want to watch the whole video, here is the briefest synopsis I could probably give, at least a small part of his overall argument. But seriously though, go read it if you care about game studies, RPGs, or simply just curious about the roots of this academic niche. It's a killer read. McKay utilizes rhetorical theory and his own experiences to demonstrate how role-playing games generate worth as an art form. More importantly to this study, how players interact inside and outside of their own identities while engaging with this art form. For McKay, role-playing games are an art form before and above all else. He utilizes Finch's concept of flickering to demonstrate the rapid frame shifting that occurs at the game table. Further, his discussions of the carnivalesque mode of role-playing games enable freedom from the cultural relationships of power. While subversive to cultural norms of power, the interactions of players operate within the influence of pop culture. This generates a unique context that is, itself, an intertext that gives a hypertext that can be read for both cultural and influences of the players, but also how they subvert or make those influences their own. The fiction the players steep themselves in becomes stripped of their material context, redefined, utilized by players as an inspiration for imaginary behaviors. These relationships of power culture, cultural norms, the freedom of play, and cultural lexicon that is generated by media all come into play at the gaming table and are crucial to understanding the context disabled players work within. For us disabled players, there are additional layers of power, cultural influences, and freedoms gained by engaging in these activities. Thus, McKay's work serves as a source to build on and bring into this disabled-oriented discourse.
Now, for those trying to keep score at home, he's saying it's a fun game of make-believe where the only limits is that of the imagination of the players.
Alright, before we get further into this, I think we should define what performance means. So, let's turn to the textbook Theories of Performance by Elizabeth Bell, 2008. Once again, another great resource.
Cool. So, why is that important?
Well, performing art is in the title, and because we're all academics, we define things a little differently than normal people. Yes, I'm talking about you on the internet. What is the first part of McKay's argument here? Well, it comes with defining performance. Performance is both process and product. Theorists try to account for performance as something that happens, emerges, and grows in and through a process, as a set of activities or specific behaviors. Performance is productive and purposeful. Performance causes, creates, produces, both itself and things outside itself. This productivity has many purposes that are often languaged as functions, uses, or interactions. This purposeful productivity is utilized to do a number of things for individuals, groups, and culture. Performance is traditional and transformative. Performance always makes reference to former ways of doing, acting, seeing, and believing. These references can uphold the status quo, critique the status quo, or contain the potential for changing the status quo by performing anew. And as we shall see, McKay is concerned with what RPGs do within culture. Performance is a part of culture. It codifies and creates it.
Art is culture, yeah. Or, well, a part of culture at least.
Now, for McKay, it is the performance of the game that brings it into existence, quote unquote. The game doesn't exist until it is enacted. However, this throws an aspect of culture into sharp relief.
The social structure of RPGs and how they interact with existing power structures? See, I pay attention.
Well, damn! That is to say, the performance of the role-playing game brings the game into existence, and it is, therefore, of foremost importance. However, approaching the topic of subject creation raises important questions about how the role-playing game's social structure plays into existing structures of power. For more, see Mackay, page 60. Alright, so now let's cover McKays Pyramid. McKays Pyramid is based upon a guy called Schechner, who is a director of aesthetic drama who focuses on art as play and play as art.
You know, Schechner breaks performance down into a pyramid with drama at the top, then script, then theater, then performance, and ritual at the base. This reminds me of the three main pillars talked about by game designers: exploration, combat, and roleplay, with tension as the base, I would argue.
And like a performance, the audience is the dominant element of any performance, quote unquote. McKay's Pyramid is similar to Schechner's in that he uses drama, that is to say the game system, script, that is to say the narrative of the game.
He means the module. Games don't have to be scripted for them to have a narrative.
Theater, the set of imaginary events experienced by the characters, and lastly, performance, the set of events experienced by the players and the game master. This is an ideocultural frame. For more, see pages 57 to 60.
Now, by ideocultural frame, that's a fancy $5 word of saying a system of shared knowledge, beliefs, behaviors, and customs that members of an interacting group use as a basis for further interaction. Thank you, Gary Fine, way back in 1979 for being so highfalutin. And the frame part just means a set of concepts and perspectives theory about how individuals, groups, and societies organize, perceive, and communicate about reality.
Tonka is on fire, ladies and gentle fiends. Now, back to Mackay. He focuses on this ideocultural frame through examining the reinforcement and subversion of power norms. Mackay uses his own play experience to discuss these points, sharing campaign narratives and the experiences of the players and characters over the course of his own D&D campaigns.
And we ain't covering those here. We'd be here for even longer if we did. And I got clouds to go yell out.
Sad, but true. Anyway, Mackay states that all of us that participate in RPGs are part of a subculture, a culture different from the dominant one.
I mean, think about it. We're all gamers, nerds, dweebs, geeks, and whatever else you want to call us. Football fans, too, I would argue. Go, my favorite sports team. Kick the goal bucket.
Quoting from Mackay directly. Similarly, the recreational community of role players is predicated upon the distinction between the official culture, socio-political and economic culture, and the subculture of gamers. The very term subculture suggests a community on the margins of official culture, a community subordinate and, if not subversive, at least subterranean and beyond the watchful eye of the dominant official culture. The question of whether the role-playing game offers an emancipatory freedom from the dominant culture or whether the subculture merely reproduces the structures of power that serve to discipline subjects within the official culture is one Mackay would return to later. End quote.
We can do what we can and give the finger to the guys in charge. Man, RPGs are fun.
That's not all. Mackay doesn't just talk about what RPGs do, he talks about how they do it. He specifically finds flickering, this kind of rapid frame shifting where you shift between different modes of engagement in the game.
Basically, player to player, character to character, and characters making out-of-game references are all three examples of frame shifting process Mr. Fancy Pants is talking about over here.
Alright then. Well, now with that being clear as mud, let's skip to the next point we want to talk about. Context, intertext, hypertext. Role-playing games as systems of cultural illusion. Man, academics have such catchy titles. McKay refers to TTRPGs as being an example of hypertext because of D&D's use of humor and illusion while not being developed or adapted to modern technology.
What he's saying is D&D is a pen and paper game at its heart, regardless of what Hasbro and WotC are doing. I said what I said. Come at me, bro.
Right? And, quote from the text, while being wrapped in a performance that is enacted, at least in McKay's words, and I quote, in a sense, the role-playing game performance was a kind of pre-technological enacted hypertext of the culture of the gaming group. I use the hypertext as an example rather than simply identifying the illusions in the game as intertextual, because when a player would make a particularly funny, witty, or clever illusion, we would momentarily downkey a frame and acknowledge the illusion. If somebody did not get the illusion, it would be explained. The shifting or flickering, as Fine describes it, from frame to frame in the role-playing game performance is analogous to navigating from link to link in a hypertextual space. End quote.
So this is a channel allegedly all about disability. Where does the disability come into today's episode?
Well, you see, McKay doesn't really talk about disability at all. Almost all game theories don't, at least the ones that I've seen. Disability studies is a bit of a niche thing, and that's why we're here.
All right, so again I ask, where does disability come in, Mr. High Self-Importance?
I see disability as entering the quote-unquote social structure of the role-playing game performance, which emerges from the opposition between the redemptive possibilities of fantasy and the degrading influence of modernity. We can escape into the fantasy even though it completely ignores those of us with disabilities. And while we could question the quote-unquote degrading influence of modernity and the lack of disability inclusion, there is some room to play here. He goes on to describe character sheets as means of a hierarchy of surveillance and potentially reflecting a quote-unquote material economy based on a hierarchy of surveillance.
Well, character sheets exist to keep players honest. They also serve as an objective records of experience, abilities, and other stuff characters can do. So I guess he's right, but can't we be a bit more positive?
Well, yeah, in a disability sense, it also objectifies the body and punishes players for having characters with disability, much like how the real world can. But wait, there's more! McKay continues later that players utilize the game for a recuperation of popular culture. Quoting from the text, through these performances, the product art of popular culture, torn away from any possible social context it may have once had, turns back into ordinary life. Serving a social aesthetic function, I have called this process of recuperation of popular culture because these participants' love for the forms of popular culture, they create a series of performances that put a real life, that is to say, the everyday, ordinary life of the player, behind the fantastic and enchanting forms of popular culture. A strategy is formed between the designer of the role-playing game, popular culture, and the ordinary life, with all its mundanity, tragedy, and unexpected twists and turns of the players.
So basically what you're saying is we use RPGs to mimic real life in some ways.
Yeah, people like to play Animal Crossing and farm sims like Harvest Moon, but even these aspects rarely include those of us with disabilities. We all saw what happened when the battle wheelchair hit the public scene. We are beholden when we play D&D to the tyrannical rule of a DM who can reinforce, even subconsciously, power structures of our real society.
Alright, so I was with you up until that point. What the Sam hell are you talking about?
Alright, let's put it this way. If the DM and the rules say you can't be disabled, then you can't. You're not allowed to. And rather than seeing disability as a difference of ability, they utilize a penalty system.
Giving penalties on searching or spotting checks to blind characters makes sense, though. And the DM is the one in charge of the game.
Yes, it makes sense, but playing D&D sometimes is entirely beholden on what the boss lets you do. And sometimes you are penalized for simply existing. Like real life. You might not be the one telling your players, quote-unquote, women are inferior to men, or blind characters can't use bows, but there's still a boss at the table whether you like it or not.
Well, damn. I thought he liked RPGs.
If you love something, Tonka, you should criticize it. Awareness is the key, even if you don't care. Look, y'all can rant and bitch about what McKay has to say here. Go ahead and read the book first, though. I'm intentionally not giving away all the secrets, and I'm not saying that just because I can't fit a 160-page book into a YouTube video. You can't do that with a paper either before y'all tell me to go write a book report instead.
You had another point before we wrapped up, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Back in 2001, McKay had a prediction, and it seems to be coming true slowly but surely. Here are his words. Contemporary computer, video, and virtual reality games have borrowed and adopted key structural and thematic concepts from commercially marketed role-playing games. Araseth even recognizes that quote-unquote Dungeons & Dragons genre might be regarded as an oral cybertext, the oral predecessor to be computerized, written adventure games. I have assumed that if the role-playing game served as the paradigm for the direction that immersive and interactive narrative art entertainment game forms are taking, the role-playing game scholarship may serve as a paradigm for cultural scholarship of an art form that is in its earliest stage of development. It is here that I locate the future uses and utilities of this book. It is a contribution to the beginning of a body of criticism, theory, and aesthetic analysis about an emergent yet largely unrecognized, in the field of theory and aesthetics, art form. In addition, it is a preparation for an aestheticization and appreciation of an art form not yet born, the immersive imaginary entertainment environment of online virtual reality system. And he goes on, I'm not going to read the rest of it, but in short, I think it's safe to say that he sees the future of role-playing games in terms that are wholly imaginary, but also largely virtual. End quote.
So, what do you think? Is the future of RPGs all in the digital world? Are pen and paper games dead? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to tap the subscribe button and like the video and share the channel.
My academic videos never do as well as the pop culture ones, so if you've made it thus far, please let me know in the comments, maybe even leave a like. Until next time, take it easy.